I don't have many clear memories from before I was 6. It's just fragments, like old photographs that have lost their color. My mom's laugh when she used to sing along to the radio while cooking. A scratchy feel of my dad's stubble when he kissed me goodnight. The way our tiny apartment smelled like warm bread on Sunday mornings. It was never perfect. We didn't have much. But it was home. Then one rainy evening, everything changed. I remember the flashing lights of the ambulance, the sound of hurried voices, and my grandmother's hands shaking as she held mine. My parents had been in a car accident. I was too young to understand what they didn't make it meant at first. I just kept asking when they would come back, and everyone kept looking at me like they wanted to say something but couldn't. The house got very quiet after that. Their things stayed where they were for a while. My mom's coat still hanging by the door. My dad's mug half full of coffee gone cold. I thought if I didn't touch anything, maybe they'd come back and everything would snap back to normal. But after a few weeks I was told I couldn't stay there anymore. My grandmother was too old and sick to take care of me, and there was no one else. That was the first time I felt the kind of loneliness that makes your chest hurt. The orphanage wasn't like the sad pictures you see in movies. Not exactly anyway. It was a big grey building with peeling paint and a yard that always smelled faintly of damp laundry. There were about 30 kids, all different ages, and a handful of adults who were supposed to look after us. Some were kind in a distant, tired way. Others treated it like just another job. My first night there I didn't sleep. I lay on a thin mattress with a blanket that smelled of bleach, listening to the quiet sobbing of another boy a few beds over. Nobody came to comfort him. I think that's when I realized we were all carrying something heavy, and everyone learned to carry it alone. It wasn't all bad though. I made my first real friend there, a very boy named Sasha, who had a chipped tooth, and a way of making even the gloomiest days feel less heavy. We shared stories about our parents, making them sound larger than life, as if by talking about them enough, we could keep them real. But there were fights too. Kids who were older, tougher, already learning to survive by taking what wasn't theirs. I got pushed around a lot at first. I wasn't strong, and I didn't know how to fight back. I remember one older boy telling me, "Nobody's coming to save you. You had to save yourself." I didn't understand what that meant yet, but it stuck with me. After about a year in the orphanage, they started sending me to different foster families. At first, I thought it meant something good, that someone wanted me. I folded my few clothes in a plastic bag and tried to be as polite and quiet as possible, thinking if I was good enough, they might keep me. Some families were fine, not warm, not cold, just neutral. I was like an extra piece of furniture in their home. I ate at their table, slept in their spare room, went to school, but I never felt part of them. No one asked about my day, and I didn't dare ask for seconds at dinner. Others were worse. One couple took me in for the government money, and the man would snap at me for using too much electricity if I left the light on. Another family had kids of their own, who never let me forget I didn't belong. They'd whisper charity case when the adults weren't listening. But there was one family, just one, who tried. They weren't rich, they didn't buy me toys, but they asked if I wanted to go grocery shopping with them. And the mom tucked me in at night, even though I was already 8. That was the first time in years I felt something close to home. I still remember the smell of her homemade soup. I didn't stay long though. Foster placements were always temporary, and I learned not to unpack all my things at once. By the time I hit my teens, I had already moved through more doors than I could count. Each one promised something different. Stability, a new start, a chance, but they all ended with a packed bag by the door. After a while, you stop expecting permanence. I started keeping to myself more. Trust wasn't something I could afford. It felt like a luxury for kids who didn't have to measure their words or watch for signs that they were about to be sent away again. If someone got too close, I found a way to push them back. A sharp comment, a fake smile, or just silence. It was easier that way. The school was a mixed bag. I wasn't a bad student, but I wasn't anyone's favorite either. Teachers called me distracted, or quiet, never really asking why. I tried sports once, even joined a soccer team, but the first time a game conflicted with a family dinner at my foster home, they told me I was being selfish and pulled me out. That's when I stopped trying to fit in. The hardest part wasn't the rules or the moves or the dinners I missed. It was the question that haunted me. Who am I really? I had no family traditions, no photographs on the wall, no one to tell me, "You get that from your father or you laugh just like your mother." I was just, and back then that didn't feel like enough. I think everyone has that one moment, or that one person, who shifts the course of their life, even if just by a few degrees. For me, it was my high school art teacher, Mr. Novak. He was nothing special at first glance, balding, glasses always slipping down his nose, hands covered in charcoal stains. But he noticed me, not in a dramatic movie scene kind of way, just small things. He asked why I always stayed behind after class, why I never volunteered to share my work, why my sketchbook was filled with half-finished drawings I never dared to show anyone. One day, he said, "You don't have to finish everything to make it worth something." I don't know why that hit me so hard. Maybe because, up until then, I felt like my whole life was unfinished, a story nobody wanted to keep reading. Mr. Novak didn't treat me like a case to fix. He treated me like a person with potential. He started letting me help set up for the school art shows. Even gave me a key to the art room so I could work after hours. It wasn't much, but it was the first time in a long while I felt trusted. Looking back, that was the crack where the light started to come through. My first real win didn't come with applause or a medal. It came with a small piece of paper taped to a wall. Mr. Novak convinced me to submit one of my drawings to the annual school art exhibition. It wasn't even finished by my standards. Just a pencil sketch of the old orphanage building, with light spilling from one window. I almost didn't do it. I told myself no one would care, that it would just hang there, unnoticed. But on the evening of the exhibition, I stood quietly in the corner, hands in my pockets, watching people stop in front of it. They didn't know it was mine at first, and maybe that's why their comments felt real. Someone said, "It feels lonely, but somehow hopeful." Another asked if it was based on a real place. For the first time I felt something shift in my chest. Pride, maybe. Not the kind you boast about, but the kind that makes you stand a little straighter when you walk home. It wasn't just a drawing. It was proof that something inside me had value, that the world might still make space for me. Kamikaze is not in just a ribbon and a mention in a school newsletter, but I kept that ribbon folded in my wallet for years. Turning 18 felt less like freedom, and more like standing at the edge of a cliff with no safety net. One day, you're a ward of the state, and the next, you're an adult who's supposed to figure it all out alone. No one hands you a map. I left my last foster home with a backpack, a folder of documents, and about $200 saved from part-time jobs. I rented a tiny room in a shared apartment that smelled of damp carpet and instant noodles. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I worked whatever jobs I could find, stacking shelves at night, sweeping floors in the morning, handing out flyers on weekends. It was exhausting, but for the first time, every hour I worked meant something that stayed with me. The money was mine, the choices were mine, the mistakes were mine too. I kept drawing in the evenings though, not for shows, not for ribbons, just to remind myself that I still had a piece of the kid who used to wait for someone to care. Slowly, that habit turned into a portfolio. It wasn't easy. I went hungry more times than I like to admit. Skipped rent once or twice. Lost jobs I needed. But each setback taught me something that the orphanage never could. How to stand on my own 2 feet. As I got older, I started to realize something I couldn't see as a kid. Family isn't always about blood, and love doesn't have to come from where you expect it. For a long time I carried bitterness. At the system, at the people who didn't stay, even at my parents for leaving me. Though I knew deep down, I didn't choose to. But little by little, I met people who showed me that connection can be built. Friends who became brothers in all the ways that matter. A mentor who pushed me to keep going when I thought I'd hit my limit. Later, a woman who didn't flinch when I told her my past, who didn't try to fix it or pity me, just listened. I used to think my story made me weaker. I know it made me sharper, more aware of how fragile people can be, and how strong they can become. The loneliness I felt as a kid didn't disappear, but it stopped defining me. Sometimes I still wonder what kind of man I would have been if that rainy night had never happened, if my parents had come home. Then, I look at what I built, with nothing but scraps of kindness and stubbornness, and I think, maybe this is who I was meant to be. Trust was the hardest thing to relearn. For years, I saw it as a trap, a way to get hurt, a door that always slammed shut. Trust when you start to feel safe. I would keep people at arm's length, smile when I didn't mean it, nod when I wanted to scream. What changed wasn't one dramatic moment. It was a slow build. A few people proved they meant what they said. They showed up when they didn't have to. remembered small details I thought no one cared about, offered help without asking for anything in return. The first time I let someone in really in, it was terrifying. I half expected them to vanish the next day, but they didn't, and each time I risked it, a little more honesty here, a little less pretending there. The walls I'd built started to thin. It didn't mean I stopped getting hurt. People still left, promises still broke, but I began to see trust differently, not as a guarantee, but as a choice you make even knowing the risk. And that choice over time gave me something the orphanages and foster homes never could, Anair. A sense that I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was beginning to live. After high school, I knew I wanted more than just scraping by. Art had always been my refuge, my way of speaking when words failed me. But turning it into a career felt impossible, not because I lacked talent, but because I had no network, no family connections, and no one to guide me. I started small. Freelance illustrations for local magazines, commissions for friends of friends, anything that paid a few dollars and kept me drawing. The first client who paid me without haggling felt like a victory. Every paycheck, no matter how small, was proof that my work mattered, and that I could matter too. I also went back to school part-time, studying design and graphics. Balancing jobs and classes was brutal. I slept a little, ate poorly, and sometimes felt like giving up entirely. But then I would look at a finished project, see someone's reaction, hear that they felt something from my work, and I remembered why I started. Slowly, my portfolio grew, my confidence grew, and so did opportunities. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building a life I could be proud of. And over the years, I realized that family doesn't always come from the people who raise you. Sometimes it comes from the people who choose to stay. I found a small circle of friends who had their own scars, their own battles, but who understood what it meant to fight for a life that wasn't handed to you. We celebrated birthdays we didn't remember, helped each other move apartments, showed up at hospital visits and job interviews. He didn't ask for loyalty. He earned it, and I gave it freely. One friend, Lena, became like a sister I never had. She would check in on me when I went weeks without seeing anyone, laugh at my terrible jokes, and challenge me when I doubted myself. Another Marka reminded me that hard work pays off, but that taking care of yourself matters too. After the first time, I felt something close to the home I'd been searching for as a kid. Not a building or a set of possessions, a community, a family built from choice, not circumstance. I never imagined I could let someone in the way I had with friends. Love seemed like a luxury for people who already had stability, who didn't spend years learning that attachments could break without warning. Then I met Maya. She was patient in the ways I hadn't known patience existed. She asked about my past without judgment, laughed at my awkward attempts at cooking, and somehow made the world feel less threatening. For the first time I realized I could share my life with someone and not lose myself in the process. Opening my heart wasn't easy. There were nights I lay awake, wondering if telling her the darker parts of my history would push her away. But each time she met my honesty with care, proving that love isn't about erasing pain, it's about holding someone through it. I learned that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness. And more than anything, I discovered that even someone who's felt unwanted for most of their life can be wanted deeply and completely by someone else. By my mid-20s, whose life I had painstakingly pieced together was starting to take shape. I had a small but steady career as a graphic designer, my own apartment with walls I finally decorated without hesitation, and a circle of friends and a partner who truly mattered. Every achievement felt like a little rebellion against the odds stacked against me. Paying my rent on time without fear, taking a vacation just because I could, even hosting my first dinner party. Each small milestone reinforced that I was no longer the kid who waited for someone else to decide my worth. I also gave back where I could, volunteering at youth programs, mentoring kids who had the same shaky start I had. It was my way of saying I see you. You're not alone. Those moments were as rewarding as any paycheck or promotion, maybe more so. Slowly life became less about surviving and more about creating something meaningful, something I could call mine, from scratch. As I grew older, I began to understand family in a way I never could as a child. It isn't only about who gives birth or who signs the forms. Family is the people who show up, who care, who love you, even when you're messy, flawed, and scared. I also learned to forgive, not to erase the pain, but to free myself from it. I forgive the foster parents who didn't care enough, the systems that failed me, and even myself, for years of self-doubt and anger. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant I could finally move forward without carrying the weight of old grudges. Looking back, I see how every hardship shaped me. The orphanages taught me resilience. The foster homes taught me adaptability. And the mentors and friends I met later taught me trust and love. My story, once defined by absence, became defined by the choices I made and the connections I nurtured. Now when I think about that small lonely boy who packed his bag over and over, I hardly recognize him. Life hasn't been perfect. There are still hard days, moments when the past creeps back in, but I've built something solid out of nothing. I have love, friends, who are family, a career I'm proud of, and a home that feels like home because of the people and choices inside it. I've learned that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting up again and again, even when the world has seemed determined to keep you down. Most importantly, I've learned that being unwanted once doesn't define your whole life. Love and belonging can be found, nurtured, and grown, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. And looking back, I realize that my story, full of pain and triumph, is mine. It's messy, it's real, and it's stronger than I ever imagined I could be.